Okay, so welcome back, everybody. We're coming towards the end of our initial quarantine workshop here in the last few classes. Last week we discussed automation, so I think it'll be probably good to do a little bit of review here. So Sona, since you were here last week, you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, so let's do a tad of review.
Okay.
Get my Epic pen out here. There it is. And then maybe that Word doc. I keep forgetting to switch this thing over to where I can get my whiteboard. It's funny, you buy a new computer, like how long it takes you to get into your new, I guess your new normal. God, I hate that, don't you? So we talked about, first of all, lead management. You'll hear it called lead management. You also hear it called lead automation. And Sona, do you remember the first one we discussed?
The lead automation response?
Well, the first one was conversion, remember?
Oh, conversion, okay.
And how does that work?
It's the formula, right?
No, the lead gets converted with the
Okay, yeah, the conversion is the lead gets converted and it goes to account, contact, and opportunity.
And which record types will be created upon conversion? If you
the
have
default.
The default record type,
yeah.
Right? So the whole idea of what's a lead, what's an account, what's an opportunity, what are the business processes associated with it? What happens when you convert? Which record type gets created upon conversion? All of that is fair game on the exam. So we have to, and you know, as you can see, or probably just throughout the class, you've noticed, this is a very important concept for admin. It's a tough thing to understand. It's a tough thing to teach. And you really need to understand it enough to where you can teach a user how to do it. If not, that lead object is going to be an Achilles heel for you throughout your career. So make sure you really understand lead conversion. Then number two was, so how do we collect leads? How do we like to get them into the platform?
Through the email. Oh, web to lead. Sorry, web to lead.
There you go. Web to
lead,
right?
Where leads from the outside say gets into the Salesforce.
So what I want you to think about here is the actual act of web to lead creation. And since Chris was here, we'll just go ahead and show that again. Okay. So here's what you need to know about web to lead for the exam. Think about it like you're actually creating a web to lead form. So let me get logged in here. I should have done this before we started the class here. Nobody's perfect. Let's see. 324, that's a good one. All right, so web to lead. The idea here is there are several ways to get a lead into the platform, Chris. One of them would be hitting the new button. So going to the leads tab, selecting new and creating a new lead manually. That would be one way. Another way to get a lead into the system would be through an import. So truly importing that lead through a data tool of some kind, either the data loader or the import wizard. The way that we really like to collect leads in the modern business environment is through our web page. We like to drive traffic to our web page, and then through the contact us form, it would be nice if we could create leads through that contact us form on our website. So this is what web to lead is for. So if I select web to lead here, the first thing, and this is what you should remember for the exam, by the way, think about the act of creating the web to lead form. So we'll create it, and the first thing that it asks you to do is to select the fields you want in the form. So this screen right here is what you really need to remember for the exam. What is it that we do to create a web lead? Well, the first thing we do is we choose the fields that we want. I added industry here when I created mine. And then there's this, where they end up, the splash page link, or where they're going to end up after you're finished. In my case, I'll put my particular website here. So once they create the lead in the contact us form, it will prompt them back to the home page of the website, for instance, or wherever I want them to end up. This reCAPTCHA down here is attempting to keep us from getting the Nigerian prince email here, or fake contacts through the web. It's the Pictionary game that you play when you're trying to get in and log into something, where they say, show me every picture with cars in it or something. You know, you get like 6 or 7 choices. I'm going to turn that off here because it doesn't really matter. So once we generate it, what it does is it creates the HTML, the code that will be used on the website to create the form. Now, this particular HTML here, what we did is we copied it, pasted it into Notepad, and saved it in our desktop. So when you're done, it ends up like this. So when I click on it, it ain't pretty, as we can see, but it will, if I was to enter a lead in here, let's say we'll do, so like I said, it ain't pretty, but it's a form. So what you do is you hand that code off to your webmaster, the person that does your website, whether it's WordPress or whatever it is you're using. And they will style it to meet your marketing style, your marketing guidelines. But this is what comes directly out of Salesforce. So they're going to take this rough, simplistic version of that code, and they're going to style it to meet your particular website requirements. So if I submit this, you'll notice it takes me back to my website here. So we're back to the home page. So they go to our contact us page, they fill it out, create a lead, and that lead will then end up in Salesforce. So that's web delete. Any questions there? Welcome back, everybody that just joined. So now if we look at the lead object, we should see under the today's leads list view that we now have Abraham Lincoln. So that would be web delete. So then, Sona, what did we do after web delete? So we had conversion. That was the first piece of automation. Then we talked about conversion. Then we talked about web delete. So what would we like to do next? If somebody creates that lead through the web delete form, what would we like to do immediately?
The lead auto response rule.
Auto response rule. And response rule, and it's on the lead object in this case. So I have come up with a nomenclature. It's a way of writing this down quickly without having to get really wordy. It's the formula for what the automation does. And we discussed, it's always an if-then statement. So we have if, and then this question mark, this kind of question mark function symbol here, it's saying if some criteria are met or formula evaluates to true, because you'll get a choice when you create the rule. You say, which do you want? Do you want criteria are met, which are our 3 boxes, operator and value. So industry equals technology. That is one way to create if criteria. And then it could also be, it's an or, so it's either criteria are met or formula evaluates to true. So we can either use the formula editor to create our criteria, or we can use criteria are met, which is industry equals technology, for instance. And we also could create multiple criteria with filter logic. So this is one thing we must choose, and that's what this means. We're saying if some criteria are met or formula evaluates to true, what were our thens? You remember, Sona? What happens if the criteria are met in this rule? It's auto response. So what are we doing as far as actions?
So then you're sending out email if the
We're gonna
criteria met
send
automatically.
an email alert. If we create an email alert, what do we automatically need?
Template.
An email template, right? A merge template that we're going to use our record to send them a personalized response. And then what else happened in auto response other than the email alert as far as our actions? How do we know the email fired?
You have to create a rule, assignment rule, right?
Well, no, we're going to create a task. Remember?
Task. Oh, yes, task.
So the email alert goes out to the lead email of the person that created the lead, meaning the customer, potential customer, the potential business relationship, right? So they're going to create the lead in the contact us form. And then we're also going to create a task in completed status. And that means that it will show up in activities history related list. So you'll see that the email fired. If it didn't create the task, you wouldn't know that it went out. Make sense? So that was our auto response rule. And then what else? You already mentioned number 4. What was it?
The assignment rule.
Yeah, we want to assign it, because if it gets created through the web to lead form and there is no assignment rule, who owns it?
No one.
Well, the workflow user owns it, and that's always the admin. So should admins own records?
No.
The only time an admin should own a record is if when the assignment rule happens, if the criteria are not met to assign it, right? So it should funnel through all the states, right? Every state in the United States, it should funnel through all of those. And if none of those criteria are met, then it should fall into a bucket where the admin owns it. But other than that, everything should really be assigned to someone other than an admin. At the very bottom of the assignment rule, because you have a bunch of different rule entries. If the state equals Ohio, it's Joe. If the state equals Kentucky, it's Ryan. If the state equals Virginia, it's Steve, right? And then you get to the very bottom, and if the state is something like PP, where there isn't one, and we didn't have a validation rule in place to protect it, then it should fall into my bucket, and I own it. So you should have kind of a catch-all at the bottom of your assignment rules. But the formula here was as follows. If some criteria are met, or formula evaluates to true. And then what was our action on the assignment rule, Sona? How do we assign ownership?
The email, I forgot.
It's all right. So think about it. If you want to assign ownership, how do you do it?
Oh, you create a formula based on the, right? Do you create a formula for that?
Okay, so I have a record here. This is a record, and it's called Ryan's record. Let's call it Ryan's account. How do I know it's Ryan's?
He's probably the owner. Like,
so what are we going to do to the owner field to assign it? Think about your 4 workflow actions that we discussed at the very end of class. We did an email alert. We created a task. Do you remember this one? That's a field update.
oh, yes, field update. You'll create a field with the owner.
Yeah, we're updating the owner field using a field update action to the new owner based on the criteria. Well, the criteria that we used were criteria are met. And we said state equals Ohio, remember?
Yep.
So if the state equals Ohio, we're going to do a field update on the owner field with, say, Joe. What else did it do? If we're going to update the field and assign a new owner, what would we like to do to let that owner know that they got a new lead?
Send an email out, automated email.
Email alert. If we create an email alert, what do we need?
You need the template.
Email template. Do you see how this, I'm just trying to build this up logically for you?
Mm-hmm.
So what I would do in order to pass the exam as far as these lead and case management rules is just memorize the formulas. Like if you see the term assignment or assignment rule, this should be what comes to your mind because it has all the pieces, just like this one here. If they're talking about a web to lead auto response rule, because these are always, it only does the auto response if it's created through lead. So you want to be sure that you understand what happens with that rule, because as we said, these are legacy automation tools. These are tools that wouldn't necessarily be used in most cases now. Web to lead, yes. Conversion, yes. But auto response and assignment, you're probably going to do that in the process builder now. This still exists and is still supported, and there's many, many orgs out there that are still using it, right? But in a perfect world, you want everything you can get into the process builder. You do not want to be doing this stuff here, but this is how it was done traditionally without code. These we're kind of looking, like I said to Sony yesterday, it's like we're looking out into space and looking at a star right now. We're seeing a star, not today, but maybe a couple million years ago. So what we're looking at with these management and automation tools that existed before the process builder, we're looking back in time at how Salesforce dealt with very specific automation situations to where because if you didn't use this stuff, if you didn't have this, it all had to be done with Apex. You couldn't do this without Apex until they came up with this. And you can see they chose very specific if-thens. They weren't giving us control of the then side. They're only giving us control of the if. The thens are already decided based on the if, and we weren't able to choose the then, which with workflow and the process builder, we are able to do that. But these existed before that, and they were very specific to very specific business process problems that most businesses have. Everybody with me? Is that making sense, or did I just lose everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So while you probably wouldn't use these now, you might have to untangle the shoestring in an org that you run into. So you need to understand them. And they are a decent portion of the automation side and the sales and service side of the admin exam. So I would say you really want to understand all of this automation stuff, because even on the app builder side, it's all automation. It's like 30% automation, 10% security. You know, it's the vast majority of the tough questions on app builder are going to be based on automation. So, you know, definitely understand all of this stuff. So after we assign it, what do we have? So we had conversion, web to lead. So the conversion is just the process of turning a potential business relationship into a real one. And then web to lead is how do we collect leads through our website, which is something that's very important without code. So we need to be able to drive traffic to our website through social media or through email or whatever. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry.
That's okay. So after we collect our leads through web to lead, we can create the form easily, create the HTML code, ship that off to our webmaster, and they can style it to meet our marketing guidelines based on our theme in WordPress or whatever that might be. And then after that, we want to say, well, if they connect with us, we definitely want to respond, and we want to do it immediately so that they know that we know that they contacted us. So that's the auto response rule, and that only works with web delete. Do you see how that's a little problematic?
Versus what? Right.
Well, if I were to go to the leads tab in Lightning
Mm-hmm.
and select the new action and then create that record, this is not going to fire. Like if I'm on the phone with them and I create the record based on our conversation and I hit save, creating that new lead record from scratch, that auto response will not fire. You with me?
Right. So we wouldn't have necessarily their email address at that time, though, either.
Well, yeah,
Right.
you would because you'd ask them about it.
Okay. If you're just saying the outreach is via phone initially,
I'm
and
saying that if, okay, so here's what I'm saying. Let's say Chris calls me up
mm-hmm.
and he says, man, I'm really interested in your P60. So if I'm an inside sales, I don't know if you're a qualified customer yet. You just said you had interest. So what am I going to create if I don't know if you're qualified?
Just
Like
a
I probably
record,
search your name or your company first. And let's say your company doesn't show up and your name doesn't show up. So then what are you going to do at that point? I don't know who you are and I don't know where you came from.
create a lead record, I would
We're going to
imagine.
create a lead record, right? So how do you create a lead record? Well, we're going to go to the object, the tab here, and then I'm going to select new. And then I'm going to fill out this form, right? And create the lead for you as we talk. So what I'm saying is that when I hit save after I create this record, that auto response is not going to fire.
Okay.
It only fires if they go through the contact us form on the website.
All right.
Do you see how it's connected totally to web delete?
Right.
That's problematic though, isn't it? Like if anytime someone connects with me, don't I want to immediately fire a response?
Yeah, I mean, I guess to keep the communication channel open. I think with the web delete, though, it's really to confirm that their submission was valid, right? That it
Well,
went
I
through
would
successfully.
say that anytime a record is created,
Yeah.
there should be some sort of response to the client, right?
Right.
So whether it was created on the phone or whether it was created through this web delete form that we're looking at right now, it matters not. There should be some sort of response. What I'm saying is if we did it in the process builder, it would fire either way.
Right.
So in this case, if we did it this way, my user would have to know after we created the record to go down and send the auto response manually. Do you see how that could make it to where people don't get the response? That's what I'm getting at.
Right. It's a manual process for that. Okay.
Well, yeah, what I'm getting at is this is all going to the process builder. The reason, Chris, that you see so many clients that want Apex is because there were many years where we didn't have point and click options and it had to be written in code. So they have, you know, however many triggers have been created in the last 20 years.
That's a valid point. So it's really where customers are wanting an admin with Apex experience, not so much for new work, but to make sure they can manage what they currently have.
Right.
Yeah. It's an interesting
Absolutely.
point there.
So while, you know, somebody like me, I don't code at all. I know people that do. Because sometimes you run into something and it's like, wow, that's a lot of Apex. Now, I usually don't act as a general contractor there. At that point, I won't be like, oh, okay, I'm going to hire this guy and put 20% on top and try and manage that. I usually send them to somebody that also has a company and let them work directly. And we usually send each other potential business, right?
Right. And you would think, though, I guess if a new company was setting up Salesforce for the first time, the necessity for or the requirement for an admin to have Apex experience probably wouldn't be as pertinent or as
Not even
necessary.
close. Not even close. Because if I, and this is what I do for a living when I'm not training, is if I can walk into an org and they've never had a CRM, then I can build their process around what Salesforce can do with point and click. I take their business process, I map it out, and a lot of times they've never mapped it out for the type of clients I work with. They've never really thought about it at a really technical, granular level. So we map it all out. And then I take that process that they've been using successfully in the past, and I kind of try to shove it into Salesforce. But if I make it, I'm bending it to what Salesforce needs as well. So I'm like molding their process into Salesforce only using point and click, never thinking triggers. Like, I don't want to get that customized. I want their process to somehow fold into the Salesforce platform where I don't have to use code. That's what I do. And then sometimes you get to a point where you've done everything you can do and you just can't do it with point and click. And then they'll be like, you know what, this is a deal breaker. And then you have to go and get somebody that can write the Apex that they need. But with Lightning, in the component-based development that we've been discussing the last couple of weeks, the components themselves can do a lot of this busy work. So really where the focus is going is not necessarily Apex, but the component development. I'm sure Chris has seen that as well, right?
Yeah.
So it's no longer setting up triggers in the controller side of the model view controller paradigm, which is what we used to have to do. Now it is actually developing a component that we can drag and drop into the record page.
And the requirements a lot of times are finding developers that are able to build those custom components and then let the admins figure out where they want to put them. And
that's it.
All that.
That's it. They say, we want a component that shows me the number of lightning strikes per day in Hamilton County, Ohio. Right? For whatever reason, that's super important. Okay. So they go to a developer that can create a component that takes a data set from the National Weather Service or whatever that is, breaks that down, and then displays it in the form of an analytic that's constantly changing. It's not really a report. It's just every time the record page is refreshed, it's tapping some outside source and it's showing the number of lightning strikes per day in Hamilton County. You see? Or geolocation software, or, I mean, the sky is truly the limit. Mm-hmm. So Apex used to be very important because we couldn't do much without it. That's no longer the case. The issue now is, how do we get the right component to make the most effective record page or home page or app page that we possibly can?
So the question is, do you think Salesforce, because there's two ways to slice this, I guess, is, do you feel like the need for developers are starting to slow down, or with LWC and new innovation and component-based modules, the need for developers are going up?
I would say, and I mean, at this particular unfortunate time, mm-hmm. At 40% unemployment, it's definitely going down. Right?
Well, it's just interesting because Salesforce, I'd like to think, talks out of both sides of their mouth, where it's like, well, we're moving towards more clicks, not code, but then they come up with a new paradigm as far as coding development standards go, and it creates another level of complexity as it relates to technical development.
Yes. Well, if you really want to make magic happen, which is what hopefully you guys have at least in this class seen, that this makes magic happen, doesn't it? As far as a business process is concerned, mm-hmm. It's like, I call it business magic. It's like, if you set it up properly and you write the spell just the right way, and you have the right data, like, all of a sudden the pots are dancing and the floor is mopping itself and the clothes are folding themselves. This is a Disney reference here. but that's like, that is what Salesforce is. On the underside of it, it's all code, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now the question is that code written by a human being, or is it being written by the platform when a human being is pointing and clicking? Which is more useful to more people? So it's like, yeah, all right, I have this coding language that I can do anything if I know the language, but it's so complex that nobody knows it. It's like Merlin, he knew all the spells, so he could do anything he wanted, but everybody else was hosed. You know, you ask the average person how the light bulb works, and they have no clue. So what you're talking about is the difference between a true technical understanding of the code and how it's written on the back end versus a technical understanding of a business process and utilizing a tool to embed it in it. So they definitely need wizards that understand the secret language.
Mm-hmm.
That is a fact. But to be successful as an admin or even a developer at this point, I don't think that you need to be a code wizard. But I also may have no idea what I'm talking about because I don't work at Salesforce in their engineering department. But that's just how my mind thinks about it. It's like they are behind the curtain, Wizard of Oz style, pushing all the buttons. You know, there's people back there writing all that code and making all this happen. What I get are release notes. They say, here's what we can do now. What I get is the documentation page. Here's where I go to find the information I need. What I get is the community. If I have a question I can't answer myself, I go to the community and ask the question. And most of the time you get a really good, solid answer. So we don't all have to be Merlin, do we? You're better off not being Merlin. You're better off finding what you enjoy and diving into that niche. If you're into nonprofit side, if you like organizations that make a difference, that don't, they're not into the profit motive, you can jump into that with both feet, make a great living, and do very well. If you want to make a lot of money, you can go be a solution architect for a large consulting firm and get a percentage of the entire job. If you want to come up with new functionality that nobody ever would have thought of before, you could go and become a technical architect where you do under your Merlin, right? I mean, the sky is the limit in this niche right now. There's marketing. If you're into marketing, the marketing cloud right now is off the charts. CPQ, off the charts. The AI side of things with Einstein Analytics. The data side of things, understanding data, especially big data. I mean, if you've got 15 million records, how do you manipulate 15 million records in order to do a data migration? You know, I couldn't do that. That is a slice of knowledge right now that is worth its weight in platinum. I mean, 250K a year plus bonus all day long. Company car, pay your insurance, the whole deal, right? Am I making sense right now? Find your niche, do what you like to do, and then incorporate your knowledge of Salesforce into that, whatever you're into. I like taking small companies and erasing their overhead. It's like, oh, you're wasting a lot of money here. This Excel sheet is costing, you know, $1,500 a week. And when you can tell them that and then go in and do it, you know, that's what I like doing. I like taking a small company because I'm a small company. I'm just me. I started my company with $500. I like to take people like me and take them to the next level. Some people like to sit in the background and do data work. Some people like to write formulas. Some people just like to talk on the phone and gather requirements or go out on location and gather requirements. All of these things are needed. Chris can tell you, right? I mean, what's the most sought after role that you see right now?
Well, I mean, if the technical realm continues to be hot, right? There's not enough developers and technical coders to, based on the demand that I'm
Yep.
seeing in the
It's been that way since the beginning too.
right. It's, you know, will continue to be that way. But I'm just a big fan, and I've always been a big fan of the analytical side and being a good business analyst, right? And being able to understand what the business, so very similar to what you do, Ryan, for a living, is going into the business, understanding what their needs are, what the problems are, and then being able to come up with technical solutions to solve their business problems.
Yep. I love doing that. And even better is if I can't do it, I know somebody that can.
Right.
See, it's like I'm a problem solver. That's what I do. I solve your problems.
Right. And you don't have to know all the answers on the spot. I mean, a lot of people get intimidated or.
I have learned that I never give answers on the spot.
Right.
Because every time I give an answer on the spot and say, I can do that, guess what happens when I go in and start trying to do it? Because there's so many variables. When they ask you, can you do this? And my comeback to that is the question isn't, can you? It's, do you want to, and how much is it going to cost?
Right.
Like you give me an unlimited checkbook, I can do anything with the Salesforce platform, but sometimes what they want costs too much. Really what they need is somebody that can come in and help them understand how to take their process that has been making them money in the past and put it into a digital space that they can then use for analytics. That is the most valuable thing you can do for a company, is take their data from the 20 different apps they've been using for the last 5 years. Well, we've been using this for this, and been using this for marketing, and we've been using this for sales, and we've been using this for, this is Google. And then we got this Excel sheet that's been traveling around since 1984. If you can take all of that and then from all of that, extrapolate their step-by-step process down to the most finite level, like, all right, what happens then? Well, what happens if this happens? What happens if that happens? And a lot of times when I'm going through that portion of business requirements gathering, they've never thought about some of the things that I ask them, because it doesn't happen very often. But they're like, you know what? I don't know what I would do in that situation. It's like, well, okay, well, let's figure out what we would do anyway. Right. And we just go through, and then eventually it's like Plinko on The Price is Right, which is a game show. And they take this round disc, and there's this board with a bunch of nails in it, and they drop the disc at the top, and it like plinks around all the different nails, and it falls into at the very bottom, it falls into a little slide. It might be $1,000 or $10,000 or $20,000. But it's kind of like how business processes are. It's like, all right, put the chip in the top. What could happen? All the way down until they're either close loss or close won. But once you have that roadmap to victory in any situation, or in not any, but most, the highest probability of situations, at the end of the day, what you're doing is metering and monitoring what's really going on as far as the pulse of the business. So once you have that, then you can create analytics that show them what's happening in real time. And a lot of times I can put it right on their phone. They pull their phone out of their pocket, hit refresh on the dashboard, and see exactly what's going on in real time. I mean, the power of that is significant, not only for stakeholders, but also for users, for sales, marketing, service. So all of this magic we've been doing in this class is all about making it really, really easy for users to do their job. And what'll happen eventually is, if you do it right, they get used to it. And if it goes down, they don't know what to do. Which is a good place to be as a Salesforce consultant. I hate to say it, but they're not going to stop paying for Salesforce, and they're not going to stop paying for you, because you've done your job and meshed the platform with the process. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox. I'm going to have to go back and listen to that and see if it made any sense at all. So we had we were all the way to assignment. Okay, what else did we have? We had our assignment rule. We also had queues. Does anybody remember what a queue is?
Basically, generic form is a list of, I guess, leads that we need to do something with.
Okay, you would think that's what that was. But, and it is sort of, but let me do the demo again. If you remember in security, we did talk like briefly about queues, very briefly, and it was a way to get full access. It was just for like a second there. I was like, we'll talk about queues when we get to automation. You may not remember this. Access and permission, all of our security BS, right? But a way to get full access was the queue. And here's how it worked, right? If this was the state of Ohio, and I had Joe, Sally, and Ryan, and they all were salespeople that worked in the state of Ohio, how would I distribute leads that came in through the website?
Well, sometimes you have rules set in place. You know, do, I guess, round robin or based on the territory.
Okay, that I was waiting for the term round robin. As your homework for this week, what I would like for you to do is try to figure out how to create a round robin lead system for sales in Salesforce. Just search the community documentation and try and find a way to do a round robin lead generation in Salesforce. You guys probably aren't going to do that. So I'll go ahead and tell you what happens. It's really, really, really hard. Like, it would take so much time that nobody would want to pay me the money it would take to do it. So how many users can own a record? Better yet, how many owners can a record have? If I have an account here, how many owners can that account record have?
A single?
One owner.
Just one. It's just a field, right? It's called owner. Let's say that's Ryan. So the reason they came up with the queue was the problem of only one owner to a record. They said, well, you know what? Let's make a queue and then we'll assign users to the queue. So let's call it the Ohio sales queue. It's the Ohio sales queue. And Joe, Sally, and Ryan are all a part of the queue. And let's say that I get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 leads that come in to the state of Ohio. Well, instead of Ryan owning the record, the Ohio sales queue owns the record. So then everybody in the queue gets what level of access? Full. So now the queue owns the record. The Ohio queue is the owner of the record. So now everybody assigned the queue has full access. So what happens is then Joe would go in, he would run the list view that says, show me all of the leads in the Ohio sales queue. You with me? And then he would go into this top one and say, ooh, there's one, grab it, change ownership to himself. Now who has full access to it?
Joe.
Joe. And the other two have? Who owns it now?
Joe does.
Joe. So what's he got?
Full access.
What's everybody else have if OWUs are private?
So private. Nothing, right?
Right. So now it's Joe's. So the idea is that they can run that list view for the queue, and any leads that show up, they can go in and change ownership for themselves and take those leads from the pot of leads, right?
Right. So is your recommendation to take that approach versus the round robin?
Absolutely. Because what does that build in the sales team in this situation?
responsibility to take records off the, assign them to themselves?
Well, there's a responsibility, and then there's also a drive to check it a lot, isn't it? Because to a salesperson, what do leads equal?
Money.
Dollars. So it's like, I don't want somebody else getting the good one, right? So you're constantly checking that list view. So you're building up a healthy competition there, aren't you? Between salespeople in the same territory in this case, or the same state. What I don't want is leads to sit in that list view and linger. How long do you think you have to reply in the modern business environment?
Oh,
You better do it immediately. Yesterday. Because if not, you're going to lose it. Not only with the initial contact, but even more so with the support side. If you neglect your support side, you will not have any customers. And we've all had that issue before. You buy something, there's a problem, you call them up, and nobody answers the phone. Oh, if you are a human being, press 1, right? That kind of crud, that makes you not want to be their customer. Now, in some industries, you have no choice but to be their customer. That's why they do it. Anyway, that's a queue. That is another form of lead management. So what you could do is have a queue called Ohio Sales, have that assignment rule, do the field update on the owner field, and make the queue own it if the state equals Ohio. And then you allow your users to go in and actually physically pull those leads from the list view to themselves. And if we're talking about a sales process where you have multiple people in the same state competing, that's the only way to fly. Now, the downside to this is somebody goes in there and cherry picks all the leads at once, right? So Joe just went in and stole all 20 leads. Well, you have to force them through analytics to meet certain goals. It's like, well, dude, you took 300 leads last month. You closed 3%. You're not following up. Look, I don't see any activities. You're just going in, you're pilfering the leads. You do it again, you're gone. Only take the leads you can handle, right? We got to be able to trust you. And do you think your coworkers like it when you go in and steal all the leads? Anyway, this is all philosophical stuff. You don't have to use it, but it's there. It's also an easy way to give access to records without having to do a whole lot of sharing rules or anything, which is also nice. So Sona, do you remember anything else?
There was also escalation rule.
Okay, so we're talking about leads right now.
Oh, with the leads.
So for leads, this is it.
Mm-hmm.
This is everything for leads. Now, the nice thing about all this is if you understand lead automation, then case automation is much easier. Case automation or case management. What's a case?
Case is more like a ticket, no?
Like a support ticket, right? There's a problem or a question that we have to deal with. And you figure Genwatt being a manufacturer of large scale power systems generation equipment, they probably do have some pretty technical support cases, but it doesn't have to be a very technical situation. You know, I could be selling galoshes or an umbrella and have a question about my product or service. So anytime we have a question or issue, we want to log these as cases. And is there a business process on the case object?
What was the question again, Ryan?
Is there a business process on the case object?
Yeah, there should be.
The status pick list on the case, right? So the ticket gets created, and depending on the type of case, if we had different types of cases, what would we use?
The record type?
Yes. Very good, Chris. We would use record types to delineate the business processes, or in this case, the support processes, depending on the type of case that came in. Maybe we just have one type of case. I would say at GenWatt, we probably have many numbers of different record types for cases. I won't go into that here, but that's how we would delineate those. We would create our stage pick list with all of the values for all of our processes. And then in step 2, upon record type creation, we would create the business process with each business process isolated, create the record type, assign the proper profiles. You get the point, right? Is anybody lost here? Maybe Rebecca. But anybody else?
I guess we could use the queue idea for this as well, right?
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm just getting to the point that it's just another object, right? With a different business process. It used to be lead. And now it's case. So on the lead side, we had conversion. Well, we don't have conversion with cases. But we do have what they call email to case. Email to case is what we're used to as far as support, isn't it? You send a ticket to support, and then you get that email back with the gobbledygook ID on it. And then you talk back and forth for 20 days and they don't solve your problem. That's what happens to me anyway. But creating a case from an email, you can do this. We're not going to do it in this class because I'm not going to create an email address and then connect it to a dev, or I'm just not going to do it. It's not that hard. You can totally do it. It's like setting up an email. It's a lot like that. You have to know the numbers and metadata for your email client in order to do it. But you can set up Salesforce to where an email will create a case record. Just know that for the exam. How else would we collect cases other than an email? Think about the ways to get a case into Salesforce. What would it be? What would they be?
Mainly entry.
Phone.
Hmm?
Phone call or web to case.
Okay, so if they call you up on the phone, how do you create a case?
Enter manually.
Yeah, go to the case tab, select the new button, fill out the case. Okay, how else would we be able, or would we want to create a case?
Web to case.
There we go. Works just like web to lead. Exact same thing. It's just the case object instead of the lead object. If it gets created through web to case, what would we want to do immediately?
Assign it to someone.
Well, first we would like to
I'll respond back saying thank you for your.
auto response. It's the same thing as on the lead side. It says response. That's supposed to say response. And then we've got our formula. How did it work? If, what were our 2 options as far as criteria?
The formula evaluates to true.
Or
Criteria is met.
criteria met. So if the criteria are met or the formula evaluates to true, then what are we going to do? What's our action? We're responding. So how are we responding? Via
Email.
Email alert, send an email alert,
If we do an email alert, then what must we have?
email template,
Email template. And then in order to log the fact that it went out, what will we need?
the tasks,
Create a task in completed status. Why does it need to be in completed status?
No action that we need to take at that point.
Well, we want it to show up in the activity history related list. So on your activities on your record, I want that task to show up as it already happened. The email is fired, so it's completed, right? The task itself has a process on it. So I want to make sure that it shows that the email was sent. It's not scheduled to be sent in the future, is it? It happened in the past, so that's why it's in completed status. So in both lead and case, this is the formula for it. Memorize that. So then when you get to the test question, if you can visualize this and understand what it means, you'll get the question right, because it's one of these concepts here. Number one, for auto response, it always has to do with web to case or web to lead. So through web to lead, you can do an auto response. What are the two types of criteria for auto response?
The evaluate the true and criteria is met.
Criteria are met, or formula evaluates to true. Right? Or 3 boxes. Or formula evaluates to true. You can choose between the formula editor or field operator value, industry equals technology, state equals Ohio, right? For ours, we chose this one. Why? We literally chose formula evaluates to true, and we wrote true in there. Does anybody know why we did that? So if you choose formula evaluates to true and you write true in the formula editor box, that means that every record that gets created through the web to lead or web to case form meets the criteria. So every time a record gets created through the web to lead, it meets the criteria and the auto response will fire. This means the if equals every time. So if you choose formula evaluates to true and you write true in the box, then every record created in the web to lead form, which is here, so anytime a record gets created here, if you put formula evaluates to true in the criteria, the response will fire every time. Do you understand? Should I do it? You want to see it? So I'm saying that case, well, lead. That's the one I already created. It was on the lead side. So if I go to a lead auto response rule, I look at it, and I edit the rule entry here, what does this criteria mean right here? See, number one was set the sort order. Number two is, what is the criteria that will trigger the then? Well, in this case, don't I want to respond to every single record that gets created through web to lead?
Yes.
So that's what this means. This means on the if side, you're saying formula evaluates to true, because you get a choice, right? You get a choice here. Do you want formula evaluates to true or criteria are met, which is field operator value? So I could say industry equals technology. But if I tried to do this with criteria, how would I make the if always true? You see that? The answer is you can't. Not with criteria are met. You can't make it happen every time a record gets created. How would you do it? Logically. With field operator value, here are 3 boxes.
You need to create more criteria, more number of criteria.
How would you do it? Logically. How would you say, Is there an is new function?
I don't know, maybe is created equals today.
Is created?
Go to your field list again.
Go to my what?
Your field drop down. So lead created date, maybe. Again, I'm just throwing out ideas.
You can do, well, I guess what I'm saying is you can do this all day and night long, and what you're not going to find is a way to do it.
Or do we need to create more sort orders?
No, you change the formula evaluates to true, and you write true.
So are we supposed to do this all the time instead
No.
of choosing, when do we?
You need to do it anytime that you want every record to meet the criteria.
Mhm.
You with me?
Yeah.
It's like, I don't need any criteria. The criteria is that it exists. It was created and it exists is the criteria.
Right, like a catch-all.
Is this.
Right.
If somebody doesn't show you this, it'll take you 1,000 years to figure it out in production. You know what I mean? This is like that effectiveness training. Because this happens a lot, right? Because what is a lead? Somebody define a lead for me.
Unknown or unqualified source.
It's an unknown, unqualified potential business relationship. It's a business card, right? So if somebody sends me a business card through my website, do I want to respond?
Yeah, just there could be
So,
potential.
in that case, don't I want every single record to meet the criteria? So every time a lead gets created, fire that off.
Mhm.
This is how you do that right here. You cannot do it here. Most other things you can do with both, right? Most other things you can either write with a formula or through criteria and filter logic, make it happen. And or a number of different criteria through field operator value. Or if you like to write code, you can use this syntax and you can do the same exact thing with code that you can do with criteria or met. I'm just trying to show you one situation that happens all the time that most people don't even know about. That'll make your life a lot easier. Because if you want every record to meet the criteria, just use formula evaluates to true and write true in there. I mean, this is the formula editor that we've used in all the formulas we've done in this class. Questions? Hopefully that sunk in at least a tad. I don't know. There we go. All right. What else did we have? After we respond, what would we like to do usually?
Get more information, maybe.
Well, it's kind of like the lead side. Who's going to own it if it gets created?
Assign rule.
Yeah, don't we want to assign it?
Mm-hmm.
So there's also case assignment rules. Just like the lead side, it's just a different object, different business process. Same thing, right? But we said if, what's this mean?
If criteria is met,
Or
formula evaluates.
formula. So if some criteria are met or formula evaluates to true, what are our thens on assignment? What's our action?
Email alert.
Well, how do we assign it?
Field update.
Field update. Which field?
Owner.
The owner field. Okay, and then how do we let them know that they got a new one? Email alert. If we create an email alert, what do we need?
Template.
Email template.
Template. Who's the email alert go to? New owner.
Owner.
See? You starting to see the formula now? It's not just like me writing on the screen, because we can keep doing this until you get it. The idea is that the record comes in through the web delete form. We respond. That response gets logged in the activities history related list. And the notification goes out as an email with an email template we designed. Criteria is based on two choices. You can do it with field operator value, the 3 boxes, or you can do it with a formula. The assignment rule says if some criteria are met or formula evaluates to true, how do we assign it? Well, we assign it through a field update on the owner field. And then we send an email alert with an email template to the new owner because we're assigning it. So not only are we giving ownership, which means we're giving them what?
Full access.
Full access. We're also going to send an email to them letting them know that they own it. And what did I put in there? Did I send them a long flowery email, Sona, with every bit of information they could possibly need?
No, just a quick email.
Well, I sent them the detail link, you remember?
Yeah.
It's just a link to the record. It says, if you got a lead or you got a case. Sorry, I have the thing. Let's see. Thought I did anyway. It's hey Mike. There it is. It says you have a new leader, you have a new case, and then it just links you directly to the record. That's a really nice trick because if your users are trying to get you to send them everything in the email, what are they trying to avoid?
Talking to you.
No. They don't mind talking to you. They're trying to avoid logging in, you see? If I send them an email with everything they need to do and they don't have to log into Salesforce, then why would they log into Salesforce? So what I'm saying is I send internal folks the detail link to the record. That way it says, you got a lead. Well, I don't want them working from their email in this case. Where do I want them working from here?
Salesforce.
Yeah. So I'm forcing them in. And they'll get used to it because it makes it easier for them. And you know, this is a terrible record page. Put it here. Let them see the details of it. Right? Okay. So then for cases, we also had queues. What's a queue? Key points of queues. You can have a queue for any object, by the way. Standard or custom.
Who is
List of users.
What's that? That is a group of users, isn't it? If you had to say group of users now, as far as security, what are our groups of users that we know of? Remember security?
Mm-hmm.
What were our groups of users now? Our two that were always there. What else? And then there's one more, which we didn't really discuss. We did, but I didn't really bring it up because really I want you to equate it to sharing. But do you see how that's the only groups of users there are? What else could there be? I mean, you can get into chatter or something, I'm sure. You get into communities, maybe there's others. But from testing perspective, think of these. When you see a group of users, sales users or management or any group of users in a test question, think of these two first and foremost for sure, because that's probably going to be what they're talking about. Anyway, so users get assigned to the queue, and then who owns the record?
The owner does.
Well, who owns it? If we're talking about
Someone with full access.
well, the owner is the queue in that case, right? So if we have a queue called the case queue, and I assign 10 people in support to that queue, and the queue owns the record, what does everybody in that queue have?
Full access.
Full access. So, like I said, if you understand the lead side, then you pretty much understand the case automation or case management side. Keep in mind that a lot of this is obsolete at this point. There's also something called case escalation, and this is not on the lead side.
Did we create a queue before, Ryan?
I don't know if we did or not. Did we?
I remember doing that.
Okay, we can do that. Let's do it now. All right, so get ready. This is super complicated. I'm just kidding. So we'll go to setup, and then users, and then queues. And I have one here called the Ohio lead queue. I'm going to create one called Kentucky. There's too many UEs in the word queue. Just saying. All right, and then the objects will say leads because it's a lead object. As I said, you can do a queue or create a queue for any object. And then we can use our sharing model here to assign users or roles or public groups. This is all the access side, right? Isn't it? What are we sharing?
No, this is about the full ownership, right? You're giving the whole access.
Yes.
Access.
We're always sharing. Anytime they say sharing, it's always access. It's never permission, except for right?
Mm-hmm.
Never goes away. It's always there. But what we're sharing here is access to records, because what's going to happen is the queue is going to own the record. The Kentucky lead queue will own the record. So I'm going to add, let's just say Joe and Ryan. So we're both in the queue now. So if I were to go to a record in our app here,
And full access is automatic then?
well, it's ownership. It's just if you're in the queue and the queue owns the record, then everybody in the queue owns the record. So they all have full. So right now, if I want to make the owner the Kentucky lead queue. Now who owns the record?
The members of that queue.
The members of that queue, and they all have what at that point?
Access.
So usually what would happen at that point is you would have a list view. See? Everybody get it? I'm saying, show me all of the leads in the Kentucky queue here, right? Really what we want is all, not my. Hang on, I'll do another filter. Do all leads. Where the owner. Now I'm kind of, hang on a second. My brain turned off here.
I think it's just
So-
name, maybe.
I think it's here. This is all leads, all queue owned leads. Yeah, because it would be yours because you would be in the queue. This is how you would do it. So there we are. We should just have, did it not work? There we go. I'm going to get rid of this one. Okay, sorry. Here we go. So it should be just the one, right? So this is the Kentucky queue. So all of the salespeople would have the Kentucky queue list view, and they would all have access to the records. Why?
As a part of that queue.
Because who owns it?
Queue itself.
The queue owns it. So everybody that is assigned to the queue, me and Joe, all have what?
Full access.
Full. So it's like I'm constantly all day long doing this. Oh, let's see that queue, right? And then it's like, oh, there's one. Boom, and you go in and grab it. And then what are you going to do with it?
Assign it to yourself.
Yeah. So change ownership.
So
Now who owns it?
You.
Join
So what level of access do I have?
full access,
What's everybody else have?
no access.
Yeah. You get it? And I'm going to need a 5-minute moment. It's probably a good place to take a moment anyway. So I'll see you in 5. It'll be 3:30 p.m. EST. All right. I think we were on escalation. Yeah, there we go. Case escalation. This one is also an if-then statement. So if some criteria are met or formula evaluates to true. On this one, above the then, I put what we call the escalation action, and it's always in the form of time. So it'll be like hours and minutes. So let's say it's 4 hours. So we're saying that if a case gets created, so how would we set every case to meet the criteria? What would we choose on our if to make it where every case meets the criteria? Be set it to formula evaluates to true and actually write true in there, because then we would have every case meeting the criteria. So what we're saying is if a case gets created, any case, no matter what, not just through WebToCase, but just ever. So even if you create a new case from scratch through the new button, it's still going to start as soon as that case gets created. So if any case gets created and then 4 hours go by, this is what's called the escalation action here. So if it gets created and it goes 4 hours with nobody looking at it, so if it sits there and nobody opens it, we're going to do a couple of things. One is we're going to do a field update on the owner field. And then how do we notify people?
Email alert.
You can send an email alert. If we create an email alert, what do you get?
Just email complete
Email template.
template. Yes.
That's our template. So if we create the email alert, we need a template and we send that out, and we could send it to the old owner, the new owner, somebody else, and then 5 people that aren't even in Salesforce. With the idea being that things aren't falling through the cracks. And then last but not least was validation. And this goes for any object as well, not just leads and cases, but all objects. Sony, you remember what a validation rule is, Rebecca?
Pardon me, Dan.
If some criteria met, formula evaluates to true, then what? What's our then?
Send an error message.
Error message. Where can we put it?
Top of the field.
On the field or at the top of the page? Either or. And I feel like in Lightning, it's always on top of the page. But in it used to be in Classic that it was on the field, or you could put it at. Now, actually, you know what? I think they updated that, and it's now on the field too. Top of page. I think we even created one. You remember the one we created? I think it was close date related, wasn't it? So if you had an opportunity, I think that's the one we did. If you have an opportunity that's the close date, it's open, but the close date is in the past. So we should be able to save this and see it. Yeah, that's a validation rule. Close dates on open opportunities cannot be in the past. We did all that last class. I thought maybe a little review would be good because there's so much automation in both tests to truly understand each one of these. And what we're about to see here in the last part of this class is that it all builds up to simple workflow. If you try to learn simple workflow before you know what those are, it gets hairy pretty quick because it's obtuse. Simple workflow is ugly and we hardly ever use it anymore. But all of the old firms that have been around in Salesforce for a long time, a lot of them have many, many, many workflow rules. So what's a workflow rule, you say? A workflow rule, it's called workflow. You'll also hear it called simple workflow. All of the other automation that we discussed is an if-then statement where we could define the if, but the thens were set in stone. Simple workflow or workflow rules. All of these are keywords you might see on exams. Simple workflow, workflow rules. They're still just an if-then. We say if some criteria are met or formula evaluates to true, but our thens we also get to choose. And our thens, there's 4 of them. They call them workflow actions. So workflow actions, and there's 4 of them. We know most of them. We can do an email alert. We can create a task. We can do a field update. So what they did is they added this new functionality back in the day where it's like, all right, now you can control the thens, but there was a very finite amount of thens. Can I create records with workflow?
We say create a task, right?
That is a record, isn't it?
Right.
So you are correct. Can I create an opportunity?
Yeah.
No, not with simple workflow. Only task records. Can I create an account record with simple workflow?
Yes.
No, I can only create task records. The only record I can create is a task that would show up in activities or activity history. Could I create an opportunity record? With
No.
workflow? No. Could I create an account record?
No, 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 no.
See, it gave us some thens that we could use, and they're commonly used thens, but they're very finite in what we could do, right? I can send an email. I can update a field on the record or its parent. So I could kind of do that roll-up summary and through like a cross-object formula situation, see, you know, if there's a relationship there, I could do a field update on either. Could I update an entire record?
Multiple field updates, you mean?
Well, see, there's the answer to that question. You could do it with multiple field updates. So with simple workflow rules, it's an if, and you can actually add multiple thens. So I could do an email alert, kind of like an auto response. They did an email alert with a task. So I can do multiple thens for one criteria, but only of these 4 workflow actions. The last one we haven't discussed yet, I was just getting you to realize that there was not much you can do here. This is why there was so much need for people that understood Apex. Because all of these orgs back in the olden days had a million of these workflow rules in place. You see what I mean? Or no? We'll see. The last action
Outbound message.
is outbound message in XML format. You need to know that outbound messages are in XML. You will probably see a question on the exam for that. An outbound message works as follows. So let's say there's some other application or piece of hardware connected to the internet, and it's sitting there waiting for a particular message. Like ding, 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 like where's the message? You know, like a satellite looking for something. And as long as that message doesn't come in, it sits dormant. But if it receives that message, then something happens. A light turns on, something gets printed. Maybe it incorporates another piece of software. And it's a commonly used language between lots of different applications and programs and hardware, XML. So you are able to send this outbound message. You can ping out and do something in something else in this XML format. That's an outbound message is the last one. You need to memorize all 4 of these workflow actions. What's this one mean?
Email alert.
If I create an email alert, what do I have to have?
Email template.
Okay. These are your actions, but just know anytime you think email alert, immediately think email template. It'll save you some time in the long run. What's this one?
Create task.
Create a task. So what we're doing is we're logging activities like email alerts, or we might create a follow-up task, follow up later. What about this one?
Field update.
It's a field update. Can I update an entire record?
Yes.
How?
By multiple then statements.
Yeah, you could have multiple field updates for multiple fields. And then what's the last one?
Outbound message.
Okay, so those are our actions. Now there's actually 2 types of workflow rules. We haven't really discussed it yet. One, they're actually not rules, they're actions. There's 2 types, immediate, which I spelled wrong, and then time dependent.
Ryan, does this come under outbound message?
What's that?
Are you discussing about the outbound message?
No, I'm discussing the 2 types of actions. So there's 4 workflow actions, but there's 2 types that kind of sit in front of those actions. It says, do you want to fire them immediately? So you have an immediate action and a time dependent action. And it kind of sits in front of what you actually want to do. So it says, do you want it to fire immediately? If so, right, go ahead and fire it immediately. And then you'll have your rule criteria, which is up here, which we've seen before. But then you're also going to have on the if side what they call evaluation criteria. So this is your rule criteria. And then down here would be your evaluation criteria. An evaluation criteria is in the form of 3 radio buttons. So it says, first of all, your rule criteria is what we've been doing with all of our other automation, is setting the actual criteria. Evaluation criteria is saying, when do you want it to happen? When do you want the criteria to be evaluated? So evaluation criteria, the first choice is created. So this one I call fire and forget, because if the criteria, well, it's going to fire when it's created, and if the criteria met, it fires once, and that's it. Boom. So if the industry equals technology, send an immediate action with an email alert to the record owner. So as soon as it's created, bam, it fires. That's it. It never fires again. You with me? Or no?
Yeah.
Okay. The next one is created and edited. This one I call spam. Only because I want you to be aware that if you do an email alert with created and edited as the evaluation criteria in a workflow rule, every time that record is edited, so it'll fire upon creation if the criteria are met. So that email would go out. And then every time you edit and save, it fires again. So you're just continuously firing this email alert every time a record gets saved by any user. So be careful about using this evaluation criteria with email alerts, because you don't want to send too many notifications to your users. They'll start to not pay attention to them, right? Now for a field update, this makes sense. If I want something to be evaluated and then update criteria based on that evaluation every time a record is saved, I might use created and edited. But just be aware of that email alert action with this evaluation criteria. And then the last one is created and edited to subsequently meet criteria. And this one I call fire when ready. So it fires when it's created. And then if it doesn't change, it won't fire. So if it evaluates the criteria and it fires, and you edit that record and that criteria doesn't change, it's not going to fire. It will just, every time you save it, it'll just be like, no, no, no. But if the fields that the criteria are in change and subsequently meet that criteria later on, then it will fire again. So it has like kind of some built-in smarts a little bit. For email alerts, I usually use this one or this one. Field updates, it's usually this one. Outbound messages, it'll depend on the situation. Usually it's on created.
And you can choose which fields for the created and edited option.
Well, all you're saying is your criteria is up here. So you're saying, here's the criteria. This is saying, when is it going to trigger? So is it going to do it just upon creation? Or is it going to do it every time it's created and edited? Is it going to fire? Or is it only going to fire? It's going to fire once and then not fire unless the criteria change to subsequently meet the criteria. But the rule criteria are state equals Ohio or formula evaluates to true. This is saying, when is it going to fire and how often? And
Right.
these are what you can actually do. These are the things that you can send. Now, immediate actions happen when? You're not going to get it till you see it. Immediate actions happen when? Immediately. Time-dependent actions have an extra step that we call a time trigger. So it'll say 30 days before some date field. So I want it to fire 30 days before the close date, right? Or I want to fire 10 days after the close date. Or I want to fire, you see what I mean? It's going to fire immediately if it's an immediate action. It's going to fire dependent on some time schedule you set through this time trigger. Let me create one and it'll make more sense. If I can get out of here. There we go. Oop. So for a workflow rule, want to do here? Let's do this. If a case gets created on an account that is a huge account for our company, let's say that I want to notify a bigwig about that, right? A sales manager or VP of something or other, right? So if you know, what am I saying there? If a case gets created, what's a case?
A problem?
Yeah, support ticket, right? So if a case gets created on an account, what's an account? Account,
Business.
Company?
the business that we're dealing with. So if I go to Burlington and I say, if a case gets created, and in this case, I've removed the case object from the page layout. For our app. Might even have to add it to the record page. So open account. Okay, good. If a case gets created, right? So there's a problem on Burlington, which is a large account. How are we going to know it's a large account? How would we define that?
By looking at the number of employees or the revenue, maybe.
Yeah, maybe the annual revenue. So once again, let's add that annual revenue field. Okay, back to my app. So if a case gets created on an account, how are we going to define a large account? We said annual revenue. So let's say, I don't know, what's Burlington have here? 250 mil. Refresh. Get that refresh. Still not on there. It's going to take a while. Let's say that annual revenue greater than 250 million is what we're going to call a large account. So if a case gets created on a large account, then we're going to send an email alert. Let's say I'm the VP, so we're going to send it to Ryan. So here's our formula. If a case gets created, how are we going to define a whale account or a large account? Criteria are met, the formula evaluates to true. If annual revenue is greater than or equal to 250 mil, right? Isn't that our if? Or then we're going to do what? How are we going to notify the VP or Ryan?
Email alert.
Email alert. And what are we going to need? We do an email alert.
Template. Email template.
And then how are we going to log that to where we saw that it fired on the record?
The task.
Create a task in what status?
Complete status.
Completed. Why? Because it's going to show up in the activity history related list. It means it's going to show up as a completed activity on the record page. We'll see that it already happened. The email fired, it's completed. There's a business process on the task. Let me show you. And then when we come back on Tuesday, we'll start here. So we've kind of set this up. We'll actually create the workflow rule. So I'll probably set it up again, and then we'll walk through the workflow rule because we're not going to have time to do it now. I got a hard stop at 4, unfortunately. But if I look at a task record, delete, I need to. You know, your activities here, do you see how you've got upcoming and overdue and then history?
Mm-hmm.
So the reason that we're creating a completed task as our action is because we want it to show up that it already sent, not that it's to be sent in the future. So if I look at a task, you'll see that there's a status field on it.
Mm.
See? So there's a process on the task itself. Well, if it's completed, it shows up in history. If it's in any of the open statuses, then it shows up into, you know, overdue or something in the future. And then you could set a validation rule against the due date to ensure that things aren't getting out of place, as we did with our validation rule last week or Tuesday. Anyway, thank you for joining me again. Hopefully this helped as far as your automation knowledge. If not, we'll continue on next week. But we will do a simple workflow rule. And then we will also get into the process builder pretty heavy, which you guys are going to like because it's a lot easier and there's a lot more you can do with it. So thanks for being with me. I appreciate your time and attention.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
Hey Ryan. Hey Ryan.
Yeah.
Sorry, I missed the class on Tuesday. What did you cover in that class? I need to catch up.
We pretty much covered what we covered today.
Okay.
So I did kind of a review today, frankly. I will get the recording up for that class. And it walks through the stuff that we did. We didn't do a ton. We covered the everything but workflow. So a lot of the stuff we covered today.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks,
Thank
man.
you.
Take care. See you next time.
Yeah.